Basket initiative is the first step towards achieving this. The COVID pandemic has caught the world completely by surprise. As we can see from other parts of the world, including Southeast Asia and Europe, the pandemic has really disrupted social systems. It has placed significant strain on our health institutions globally, and for systems that are already weak, as in the developing countries, we worry, we're really concerned about the impact this could have. And that's why we stand shoulder to shoulder in solidarity with the rest of the world, as well as with our partners, to make sure that the impact of the COVID pandemic is minimized in this part of the world. I would like to welcome you all, and I would also like, on behalf of the Secretary to the Government of the Federation, who's the chair of the Presidential Task Force, extend our appreciation to all our partners who have demonstrated that they are true friends when it comes to our time of need. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Sani Aliu. May I now invite the Honorable Minister of Health, Dr. Sage Ohanere, to the podium for his remarks.
I must free myself first from that. Good morning, everybody. The Secretary to the Government of the Federation, Your Excellencies, ambassadors here present, heads of missions and acting heads of missions, directors, Director Generals here. I join Dr. Sani Aliu in welcoming you all to this very important gathering. When the news of the outbreak of COVID-19, what was to be COVID-19, first broke in Wuhan, China, we all faced what was to come with some trepidation. And this only increased when we began to see the follow-up and the consequences both inside China and later on in Europe. And looking at our own health systems, which are not the strongest in the world, we felt the only strategy, the best strategy we had, was to be early, to be quick, and to start off as early as possible with prevention and detection measures. And it was in that spirit that it came as a great relief when UN group got together and invited us to a meeting which was turned out to be pivotal in working out our strategy. The gathering here today is a product of that meeting that brings us together to create one common basket fund. I remember the injunction of the 4 ones, which we took to heart, and also the fact that we were immediately promised at that time what I believe was the first contribution of $2 million for commodities, which I'm told will start going into fruition on Tuesday. That's tomorrow. I want to thank you all for that. It is my belief that following the meeting and working well together, we have the best chance to be able to face this epidemic. I also want to pay particular tribute to the ambassadors of the United States and Great Britain and the European Union, who were also at that meeting to offer their support, in spite of the problems they also face, and other European countries here who also are dealing with problems that are quite severe in their own countries and still have an eye for us. I also want to commend the Global Fund for giving us the latitude to reprogram some of our funding requests to be able to address the COVID-19 outbreak, which is a great courage, a great contribution to what we are facing. I believe that the journey is just the beginning. We have a long way to go and the road will be rough ahead. So we would need all the help you have, particularly the United Nations group, who work all over the world, and particularly with the WHO, to bring the aggregate experience you have from everywhere to bear here, to learn from mistakes and to also copy the good examples that we have seen around the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. We shall now take the goodwill message from the head of the European Union delegation to Nigeria and the ECOWAS, Ambassador Ketil Carlson.
Thank you very much. Good morning, Secretary to the Government of the Federation, Honorable Ministers, the UN Resident Coordinator, my dear colleagues, Your Excellencies representing the US and the UK, members of the press, good morning, all of you. As the world is now facing this unprecedented challenge of the COVID-19 pandemic, now more than ever before is a time for togetherness. As individuals, we do need to keep distance, but as a community, we need to come together. Already the crisis has translated into human tragedy. In Europe, as we are speaking, a staggering around 50,000 people have lost their lives, and globally 1.3 million have tested positive. Also in Nigeria, we have seen the impact of the pandemic. Even if the numbers are still lower in Nigeria, we cannot discard the risk that also here the pandemic could get a firmer grip. And that is why I wish to commend strongly the Nigerian authorities for taking bold measures to limit the spreading of the virus, flattening the curve, reducing the adverse economic effects, and increasing availability of testing and treatment, all while reminding everyone of their responsibilities. Nobody and no country can fight this scourge alone. So it is truly more than ever a time for solidarity with those falling ill, of course, but also between nations. And that is why we welcome so much the initiative by the government to set up coordination structures and for the United Nations to echo that effort with the establishment of the One UN COVID-19 Basket Fund that we launched today. For the response to be effective, it needs to build on Nigerian leadership, your policies, your priorities. Focusing, of course, on the immediate needs, but being aware as well of the impacts for the most vulnerable of our societies. Those that always pay the highest price when our economies are struggling. Women and girls with intensified risks of gender-based violence, poor people depending on the informal sector to get food on the table every day. They all depend on the government to rapidly upscale support and to provide the necessary safety nets. The best we can do as international partners is to support this effort in a swift, direct, and transparent manner, putting aside bureaucracy and creating quick results. The One UN Basket Fund has the potential to deliver exactly that. And that is why we commit as the European Union to channel the bulk of our support for the UN COVID-19 response in Nigeria. Already we have paid 1.2 million euro to UNICEF, and I expect to be able to announce significant additional support for the fund very soon. So tomorrow, the senior leadership of the European Union is getting together to discuss what can be done to support Africa in this situation, where hopefully there's still a chance to learn from the experiences elsewhere and stopping the virus before consequences become too dire. To all Nigerians, I wish to say, you are not alone. We stand with you shoulder by shoulder, as international community, as the EU, and as the UN. Establishing the One UN Fund is an excellent example of multilateralism in practice. And I wish to thank the United Nations for setting up this mechanism in record time, and to the Nigerian authorities for establishing swiftly your own coordination mechanisms too. We need the flexibility to adjust along the way for those mechanisms to cater for the needs on the ground and for information to be shared transparently. History will judge us on our ability to convert words into action and transforming every naira put into the fund to real, tangible results. That must be our ambition. So again, thanks to the government of Nigeria and to our international partners and the UN in particular for bringing us together in a truly collective response. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Before I invite the UN Resident and Humanitarian Coordinator to the podium, let me quickly mention a few arrivals. We have with us Minister of Aviation, Hadi Sirika, as well as the Minister of Environment, Dr. Mohamed Abubakar. Similarly, I must mention the presence of Mohamed Yahya, UNDP Country Representative, Erasmus Morahe, UNAIDS Country Director, Peter Hawkins, UNICEF Representative, Ula Mola, UNDP Representative, and Dr. Fiona Braka, WHO Representative. May I now invite the UN Resident and Humanitarian Coordinator, Edward Callon, to the podium.
Excellency, the Secretary to the Government of the Federation, and the Chair of the Presidential Task Force for COVID-19 pandemic, Excellencies, Minister of Health and other members of the Federal Executive Council, National Coordinator of the Presidential Task Force for COVID-19 pandemic, my friend and colleague, Dr. Sani Aliu, Director General, National Center for Disease Control, who I'm made to understand is represented by somebody here, Excellencies, members of the diplomatic corps, and friends of Nigeria, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, colleagues of the UN system, members of the press. I want to convey to you greetings from our sister, Amina Mohammed, and the Secretary General, Mr. Guterres, and they conveyed their support to what the government of Nigeria is doing and have asked us to do all what we can in our capacity as the UN to support the government's effort. Excellencies, I'm honored to join the Secretary of the Government of the Federation to launch the Nigerian UN COVID-19 Basket Fund to enhance coordination, technical and financial support to the Presidential Task Force to prevent, prepare and respond to COVID-19 pandemic. Shortly after the index case of 27 February 2020, the UN system in Nigeria, in accordance with the UN reform, adopted a one UN response to support the national COVID-19 leadership to prevent, prepare, and respond to the pandemic. Excellencies, colleagues, and guests, this is a trying moment for all of us as our shared humanity is under threat of the COVID-19 pandemic. Societies around the globe are in turmoil, and economies are in a nosedive. It is unclear what the true magnitude of the spread and impact of the virus will look like in Nigeria. The available evidence is, however, clear. The only effective response to the COVID-19 pandemic is testing, isolation, and contact tracing. Excellencies, colleagues, from preliminary macro and micro socio-economic analysis, the COVID-19 pandemic is expected to place immense pressure on Nigeria's healthcare system and will result in a serious economic and fiscal pressure with a risk of a negative social impact if proactive measures are not taken to prevent, prepare, respond, and cushion the economic impact of the pandemic. The International Monetary Fund has reassessed the global prospect for growth for 2020 and 2021 and declaring that indeed we have entered a recession as bad as or worse than 2009. We must respond decisively, innovatively, and together to suppress the spread of the virus and address its socio-economic devastation that COVID-19 is causing in our world today. The magnitude of the response must match the scale of the crisis. It must be large-scale, coordinated, and comprehensive, with country and international response being guided by the World Health Organization. And it must be multilateral, with countries showing solidarity to the most vulnerable communities and nations. In the word of the Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, and I quote, "There is no other way to deal with global challenges than with global responses organized in a multilateral way." On 23rd March 2020, the national COVID-19 leadership of Nigeria met with the UN country team leadership and key bilateral donors to discuss the unfolding emergency. We collectively agreed to adopt the 4 guiding principles of engagement for national authorities and partners to respond to the pandemic. And those principles were one national COVID-19 multi-sectoral pandemic response plan. 2, one COVID-19 national coordinating authority with a broad-based multi-sectoral mandate. 3, one COVID-19 M&E system for tracking and reporting progress. And 4, one COVID-19 financing and investment platform. Consequently, the COVID-19 Basket Fund has been designed to serve within the one COVID financing and investment platform through which the different stakeholders, i.e. the United Nations, other multilateral and bilateral donors, as well as other key stakeholders, can channel their financial contribution to the multi-sectoral efforts of the Presidential Task Force on COVID-19 response. The National COVID-19 Multi-Sectoral Response Plan is developed around 10 key pillars, including coordination. The UN would like to urge investment into these 10 key pillars identified in the government plan and support nationwide socio-economic intervention of vulnerable groups, particularly on efforts aimed at scaling surveillance, testing, isolation, contact tracing, personal protection equipment for medical staff, disinfectants for medical facilities, risk communication, community engagement, and clinical management of the critically unwell COVID-19 patient. Excellencies, colleagues, and distinguished guests, we must tackle the devastating social and economic dimension of this crisis with a focus on the most vulnerable and most affected people. And that include women, older persons, people living with disabilities, youth, low-wage workers, small and medium enterprises, and the informal sector. We must pay attention to those in humanitarian and conflict settings where the potential risk of community spread is high. The Basket Fund will also address critical areas of the National Multi-Sectoral Pandemic Response Plan. I must commend the federal government and states for their efforts in mobilizing financial and non-financial resources to address the impact of COVID-19. However, they cannot do it alone. For the country to succeed in eliminating the coronavirus threat, it calls for all of us to act cooperatively across all sectors and support the government's effort at this time of great human need. I therefore call on all stakeholders to work together to contain the COVID-19 pandemic in Nigeria. Excellencies, colleagues, distinguished guests, the world is facing an unprecedented test, and this is the moment or moment of action or truth. as said by the Secretary General. We urgently need an immediate coordinated health response to suppress transmission and end the pandemic. Here again, I call on the international community. Debt alleviation must be a priority, including immediate waivers on interest payments for 2020. The recovery from the COVID-19 crisis must lead to a different economy in Nigeria. Everything we do during and after this crisis must be with a strong focus on building resilience, ensuring equal access to social services through system strengthening, in particular health system strengthening, and investment in building more equal, inclusive, and sustainable economy and society that are more resilient in the face of pandemic. And various of these exist around us today. Climate change and many other developmental challenges that the government of Nigeria continue to struggle with. To my brothers and sisters, this is your moment. This is your moment to join your government in unity and strength to fight COVID-19. As we say in times like this, Niger no go come last. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I now invite the Secretary to the Government of the Federation and Chairman of the Presidential Task Force on COVID-19 to the podium to respond and to launch the fund.
Members of the Presidential Task Force on COVID-19, Your Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, please permit me to stand on already established and existing protocol. Thank you, Your Excellency, for being truly Nigerian this morning. Niger no they come last. I am pleased to be here this morning to launch the One COVID-19 Basket Fund for Nigeria. This is a monumental joint initiative that signals the togetherness that humanity desires at all times. The world is in the midst of an unprecedented catastrophic crisis. Coronavirus COVID-19 has spread across 209 countries and territories around the world, with a reported 1.249 million confirmed cases worldwide, about 68,000 deaths, with about 236,000 people who have recovered from the disease as of yesterday, the 5th of April, 2020. The disease has placed considerable and significant strain on the global healthcare system. Although it started in China and spread rapidly across Europe and the Americas, today many African countries are beginning to see a rapid rise in the number of cases. Currently, 54 African countries are now affected with the disease. Given the relentless exponential growth rate witnessed in other countries, the spread of the virus in the continent, and in particular in Nigeria, should be expected. As of April 5th, 2020, there were 224 confirmed cases with 5 deaths across 14 states in Nigeria. The government of Nigeria continues to take stringent steps to contain the spread of the disease and manage confirmed cases. Testing capacity has been expanded and shall continue to expand. Currently, 2 states and the FCT are under lockdown on the authorization of the President. but several other states have put measures of restrictions of movement within their territories. Even as we push harder on awareness creation among Nigerians, our international points of entry, both air and land, remain closed. On 23rd March 2020, the National COVID-19 Leadership of Nigeria met with the UN leadership and key bilateral donors to discuss the unfolding emergency. Both parties agreed to adopt the 4 1s guiding principle of engagement for national authorities and partners to respond to this pandemic. One agreed national COVID-19 multi-sectoral pandemic response plan, and 2, one COVID-19 national coordinating authority with a broad-based multi-sector mandate, and 3, one COVID-19 M&E system for tracking and reporting progress, and lastly 4, one COVID-19 financing and investment platform. I'm happy to state that the COVID-19 Basket Fund, which is being launched this morning, has been designed to serve as the one COVID-19 financing and investment platform through which the different stakeholders, including the United Nations, other multilateral and bilateral donors, as well as private sector donors, foundations and philanthropists, can channel their financial contributions to the multi-sectoral efforts of the Presidential Task Force on COVID-19 response. The one COVID-19 Basket Fund is robust and is capable of rapid procurement of equipment and consumables, as well as supporting socio-economic interventions of the vulnerable groups, as well as efforts aimed at scaling up surveillance, testing, isolation, contact tracing, personal protection equipment for medical staff, disinfectants for medical facilities, risk communication, community engagement, and clinical management of the critically ill. The Basket Fund will also fund socio-economic measures such as cash transfers or food distribution to the vulnerable groups. The government of Nigeria appreciates the role of the United Nations is playing to rally partners to support our nation's effort to fight the pandemic. And the operationalization of the one COVID-19 Basket Fund will be of great help in complementing government's effort to coordinate mobilization and rapid deployment of assistance where it is needed the most. We wish at this juncture to register our appreciation to the Secretary General of the United Nations for commending our modest response to the pandemic and assure you that this will spur Nigeria to work harder. We have the will, we have the people, the tools, and now we have the financing structure. It is now my singular honor and privilege to launch the one COVID-19 Basket Fund to the glory of God and to the best use of humanity. I thank you for listening. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chairman, Presidential Task Force, and Secretary to the Government of the Federation. That brings us to the end of this ceremony. As we step out from the entrance of the building, we will regroup to take a photograph to record this event. I thank you very much. We shall now take the national anthem again. Arise, O our throats, Nigeria's call obey, to serve our fatherland with love and strength and faith. The labor of our heroes past shall never be in vain, to serve with heart and mind one nation bound in freedom, peace and unity. I thank you very much.
So don't ask to have an interview, but there are some things we need to be clear about.
Clear it in the afternoon at 2 o'clock.
Sir, this news.